I can't hear Swim.
I can't either.
Swim's doing like the intro and just no one can hear him.
Yeah, no, well, sorry, one moment. I had to I had to figure out a little technical snafu. Anyway, welcome to a very special episode of the Gwentlemen Talkshow, where, of course, as many of us know, today we got a lot of new reveals all at once. We had 3 so far, and if I'm not mistaken, we're actually getting 2 more literally any minute now. So we're going to be able to discuss those live, and actually we'll be able to show off our like actual first impressions of them. So that'll be pretty exciting. But as of course I'm joined by Jago Lantern.
What up, Swim Arena King? Halloween names, dude. It's totally cool. This is my Twitter name as well.
Yeah. And we have Dale Twitch Traveler, who of course just came back from his thing at TwitchCon.
It was a good thing. It was indeed.
And our guest this week is going to be Truedawn, which you may know from the Tier 2 podcast. Who you may know from Tier 2 podcast.
Yeah, it's good to be here. It's awesome to see all you guys and talk to you about awesome new cards and stuff.
Yeah, anyway.
Dude, welcome to the Tier 1 podcast.
Jeez. Not about that.
No, this is Gwentlemen Talkshow because we couldn't think of a better name.
Yeah. So, as it is, we have a bunch of new cards to discuss. This is going to be the thing on everybody's mind, I think. We have a few other things to talk about, but in terms of the new cards, we've had 3 revealed so far. We're going to have you guys keep an eye out for when Merchant and McBeard reveal theirs, which should be literally any minute. So, in terms of the 3 cards that we've seen so far, which are the Slizard, the Mandrake, and whatever my card was. What was it called?
the Giant PFI.
Yeah. Giant
Peasant
PFI.
King, or it's called like the Peasant King or something.
Yeah. The something.
Secret cow level?
Yeah.
Peasant Leader. There you go.
Yeah, Peasant Leader.
Leader.
Yeah.
I'm really upset because this means that peasants aren't going to be a faction. Like that was my hope for the 6th faction was going to be peasants, and then now like they've made a neutral card called Peasant Leader. So no luck, never lucky.
Yeah. So out of the 3 cards that we've seen so far, I'm curious like what you guys, if there's any among them that you guys think particularly really speak to you. Jaggerus. I mean, I assume all 3 of you have seen the 3 cards and actually, digested them. Draggerus, what do you think out of the 3?
I think the obvious one that people are going to be crying about is Peasant Leader, just because of the current state of monsters and swarm and beasts. Because if harpies don't get changed from that, we're spawning 2 cows onto the right and 2 cows to the left. If those cows are beasts, that's 4 beasts in 1 card for a silver. Plus, you then have 5 units on the board, which, is nice for Commander's Horn. It's nice for Yennefer. And that's the one that people are maybe going to be the most worried about, I would say, in terms of strength. Though, personally, I expect Harpy to get changed to this patch.
Okay. Dale, what do you think? And we're going to have to go through these because we're actually getting new cards. But let's cover the 3 first.
Of the 3, I think, probably Peasant Leader is one I am most excited about. It's mostly for the same reasons you already listed in your reveal video. It's, as a neutral card, which I think of the 3 that we've seen, the only one that hasn't been a neutral card so far has been Slizard or Slizzard. I don't know how you want to pronounce that thing. But it's Commander's Horn fodder, right? It's Yennefer fodder. It's just like, I want to have stuff on the board. It's like, we've had these deck types before that are like, hey, we want to try and swarm the board, and this is the card that's just like, have units. Like, this is just going to be insane for a number of effects that require X amount of units on the board. Yennefer, Commander's Horn, even things like the potions, letterable potions, or anything similar. Like, just having stuff on the board is so valuable that the 12 strength, I think, is just going to be something that people look at and it's like, that seems a little low, but it's the flexibility of how it's spread out, the fact that it's agile, and the fact that you're just able to set up all of these stuff. Just, it's stuff on the board, and that is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think people are really going to underestimate this card's interaction with K20 Siege support specifically. Yeah, I mean, just in terms of that deck, you can play it for 27 points with 3 Siege supports. I don't know, Truedawn, out of these 3 cards, what do you think?
I don't know. Mandrake makes me feel feelings, man. That card art's something else.
Yeah,
that's ridiculous. But On a serious note, I actually like Slizzard a lot. Slizzard is essentially Reverse Scout, but for monsters with its own twist. That's going to help with consistency on monsters a lot. I know that faction kind of struggles with that, although that's like in part because of like Harpy Mulligan nonsense and all of that. But if you want to like opt out of that variance, you like now could potentially have the option to do that with a more consistent deck involving Slizzard and like whatever consume synergies.
Yeah, same thing. I think monsters is always, besides obviously the harpies right now, like if you don't go with that, you don't have a lot of ways of thinning your deck. So getting that consume way of thinning the deck out is really cool. Although I like, it's always odd when it's like consume, which is a keyword that does something, but this time do something else.
Yeah, just do something completely different.
I think it'll be interesting to see how it fits into consume decks with things like Neckers and Harpies and Vranwars and all that, whether this is going to have a place for targeted draw to make maybe consume a bit more consistent. I mean, I'm wondering if CDPR are trying to make Unseen Elder a bit better with this card, and maybe they have other cards coming that will synergize quite nicely with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting. I love the design behind Slizzard. It's by far my favorite out of the three we've seen so far. And it's just something that will potentially revive, like, you know, an all-in kind of Necker consume sort of archetype, but we'll just have to see how it works out. Very interesting and unique card effect. But we already have two more revealed cards, both Merchant and Life Coach revealed theirs, and I think McBeard should be any moment. So let's start with Life Coaches, which if you guys haven't seen it just now, I don't know if we can pull the image up here, but it is Dol Blathana Swordsmaster. So she is a Squirtle card, bronze, 4 strength, agile, deploy, damage an enemy by this unit's power. She's basically, they took Brain as a card, they turned it into a 4 strength bronze card.
That's strong.
Yeah.
That is good. Like, wait, it's just like 1 point less than Brienne, but Brienne at bronze?
Yeah, it sounds like it.
That doesn't sound right, does it?
Are we expecting brand getting changed then?
Yeah,
like
we're assuming Brain's getting changed. So basically what they're doing is they're looking at the hand buff package, the Dragoon, and the support, and people have criticized these cards for not being super great, except in like super niche kind of like bleeding soft bamboozle decks. They're looking at these cards and they're saying, okay, this is an archetype, but it's right now an archetype that's built around a silver, and it would have much more identity as its own archetype if it was built around these bronzes instead. So I assume they've reworked Brain to fit this archetype, but do something slightly different. And they've taken her a point down and made her a bronze as well.
I think it's interesting because how many of these would you run in your deck? Because so if you don't buff them, they're 8. If you can get a 3 strength buff on them, they become 14, right? So that's at the moment the Hawker support, I believe, buffs by 3. Whether that gets changed or not. So 1 buff on 1 swordsman makes it go from a 8 to a 14. But then how many would you feasibly run? Because you should only need 1 or 2 targets to buff, right? Because
exactly.
You know, most people are going to have something that's worth 7, between 7 and 10 points on the board. So you should usually get the target for it. It's not, you know, a situation where you necessarily need 3 of them. So I'm kind of intrigued as to if this card is as strong as people are going to like say it is now.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think a lot of people are saying this card is strong because, of course, it's a bronze card that has the same exact effect as a silver card that's already being run, but only 1 point less. But, of course, because of the nature of its ability, 1 point really matters. And it's kind of hard to really build a deck around this at the same time. We'll have to see what they've done with Brain, because that's the biggest implication here. Yeah. But, yeah, what do you think, Dale? You have anything to say?
It seems extremely strong. Just because, I mean, you're not trying to build a deck necessarily around it. Like it's going to be fitting into the hand buff package, and it's just going to be like, even if it's only like a 2 of, which this might be the first bronze card that I'd be like, yeah, I'd like to be running 2 of these as a unit. But I mean, as was already pointed out, like 4 + 4, it's 8 right off the bat, which puts it at the right in the lower range of a bronze card. But you get a single, just a proc from the Dragoons, a proc from the support, and it's already, I mean, it's exponential value. Like anything with doubling point value is normally pretty darn strong. And Squirtle has a tendency of being able to get exactly what it wants when it wants it. Looking towards with the Francesca leader ability, namely, like, and that buffs too. So just Francesca for this, and you already have a good 14-point swing. Like, this is such a swingy card. This is such a card that's going to get Squirtle reach and I don't know, like hand buff seems like it's going to be pretty fun. I agree. It's what the heck is happening to Bran? Because if it's just a 5 with the same effect, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
But I think that we're seeing it go, like, moving this to a bronze card. The biggest change that I see from it is that this is no longer a finisher card that you spend all your time building up one of and then trying to get a nice big swing at the end. This is now something that's able to either get you reach and maybe go back to like an old Squared play style of, less tempo, but always having the ability to jump ahead, so you can never really be too sure about what they're doing. Or it's going to be just a generic, like, get some points on the board in like round 1, round 2, and maybe you can even save one of these for round 3. Like, it's a flexible card, and it's a good card even when you just have a couple of them in your hand.
Yeah, this is like dealing damage is so much better than just like normal strength, because you're potentially removing your opponent's stuff from the board, disrupting their synergies. There is diminishing returns in this card, as Jagger has talked about, but whenever I played like decks with Brienne, although I like have a limited amount of experience with them compared to like Swim or somebody, but I always like, you needed to have it. Like, the games where you had it and versus the games where you didn't were like huge differences. So now having 3 means you're always, or very, very often, going to have one thing to buff. And if you get multiple, you can actually use them for different things. Like, you can play one just base to kill something or damage something. You can fully buff one up as a finisher. You can spread it out for like various purposes. Just not having just the one Brienne, but now having multiple of that card allows you to do a bunch of different things and employ a bunch of different game plans based upon whatever situation you find yourself in.
Yeah, I love this card. I gotta say, if I could say 2 things about this card, it would be that I love what they're doing here, because one of the problems with Gwent's design is that just a couple cards, a handful of cards in the past, have felt like they've limited archetypes because they have effects that should have been printed on bronze but were printed on silvers or golds instead. This card represents a transition more towards that, empowering bronzes, empowering archetypes. Hand buff never really felt like an actual archetype per se. It felt like, a package that certain decks in the past have utilized, but it's moving more towards an archetype, and that's really cool. I'll have to see what they do with Bran. But in addition to that, a lot of people are kind of overvaluing it. Whereas, I mean, if you look at the combo of this card plus support, in reality, you're only getting 20 points for 2 bronzes. It's nothing incredible, right? I mean, you're using support is still kind of, unless it's buffed, it's still kind of a lower level card to the point where it feels like it won't empower this too much.
I mean, the way I see it is that it makes drawing your Brienne-esque cards more consistent, so that if you're going for that hand buff strategy, you're still seeing that value, that extra, like the double worth per point of hand buff. Mm-hmm. But the biggest thing I think about this card is it frees up a silver slot. That's what it's doing here, is it's giving you more versatility in your silvers by moving a silver to a bronze. And obviously, like you said, we have to see what Brienne becomes, but this, I think, just gives, I guess, the hand buff deck a little bit more choice in terms of what it runs, because typically you'd run to reveal and Brienne, because they are your 2 best kind of buff targets. To reveal because she flips at the end, and Brienne because you get extra value. But this maybe gives you a bit more strength by moving that hand buffing archetype to the bronzes, giving you more flex in your silvers.
Yep. No, absolutely. And then, of course, on top of this card, we have the second, or even, I guess at this point, it's the 5th revealed card today, which is Merchants revealed just a few minutes ago, which is this new gold neutral card, Muzzle. This card reads, I believe, basically take control of an opponent unit. I think it's bronze or silver, with 8 or less strength. So it's basically like the Nilfgaard card Treason, except instead of 10, it's 8, but it doesn't have to be disloyal. If I have that correct, what do we think about this? This is a bit of a crazy one. Jagras?
Let Truedawn go first. He's a guest.
Oh, yeah, Truedawn.
I'm just, like, off the top of my head, I'm trying to think of what things have like persistent board effects or any like relevant text box on the field that you would want to take, because obviously it's capped at 8, so it's not going to be like a giant raw point play initially. You're going to be getting some external value either by breaking up what your opponent's doing or like getting some effect. So like something like Skidway Siege Support, like just it's like a medium one, but something in that vein is the kind of stuff you're going to be targeting this with. And in that regard, it's like pretty strong. It's like there's opportunity cost with gold, but most golds right now are reactive cards. So I could definitely see this being better than like an Eskel or an Igni in certain situations for certain decks.
Yeah, I gotta say, I feel like the card that's best to compare this to is actually Assassination, oddly enough. It's a gold card. It can achieve 16 value in the same way. It swings for 8. You use it on kind of the same targets, but it is better on targets that have abilities instead of requiring 2 units to be on the board. I don't know. What do you guys think, Jaggers?
I think it's really interesting. Like, it's going to be really strong against carryover because you can just take people's carryover. That's the place I see it. Like, a lot of people complaining about things like Ekamara and Morkvarg and Orgierd. But, if you can do 1 damage to a Orgierd played from hand, for example, you can just take it for yourself. There's kind of options there. And I definitely agree with Truedawn that you're looking at cards that have an effect. You're looking to take, you want to get more than that, say, max 16 value from it. You want to get the cards that do something. So I guess it just comes down to thinking which cards are there that are silver or bronze that do this. And the only thing that I can really think about this is it's such a shame for Skellige, because Skellige is already struggling with their kind of great swords and their boats and that whole synergy. Because I love playing that. It's like really fun. It just doesn't do very well.
This takes like every card Skellige.
Yep. And now here it's like, oh look, you got a card that does something. Well, no, you don't. Sorry, baby.
And they don't get to res it ever either.
Nope.
That's fine. I think most people will not actually be missing Skellige in that way.
I suppose.
Yeah, just Skellige gets it from every direction. It's unfortunate. But yeah, Morkvarg and Olgierd seem like really good targets for this. Stuff like that. I mean, it's like Enforcer for Nilfgaard is another one. All these like a little bit lower strength things, but really depriving your opponent of what their game playing is trying to do. So I could definitely see this card being like a flex interactive gold that you play in the spot that like people have traditionally run like Igni or Eskel or whatever.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely a bit of a tech option. It's going to be a little bit meta dependent. I feel like it definitely looks a lot stronger than it ends up being, but that's not to say that it can't be something run in competitive decks at all.
This seems like it's going. I don't know. Maybe I'm like, because I'm just trying to think like what situations is this good? And you guys already mentioned Skellige. I mean, it's fitting that we get this right after we were talking about hand buff Skoyatel, like steal some of some Dragoons or something. It's going to be good against monsters with as much Death Wish is going on. A lot of their stuff is going to be 8 strength or lower. Those Death Wish is like, oh, I'll take that Necker, sure. Like it's feels like almost a more powerful but slightly more situational artifact compression, where it's not only disrupting what your opponent's doing completely in the fact that like they're not able to do that strategy again at all. They can't even res it from you unless they manage to steal it back from your graveyard, in the case with monsters and some griffins. But it feels like it's going to very much be meta dependent, as Swim said, but I feel like it's almost like enough. It'll bend. Like golds have historically been easy enough to get access to, especially with Royal Decree. Being able to try and get a little bit more consistency on that. So it's going to be interesting to see just how much this props up, just how the meta develops, because this almost feels like a card that can shut down meta decks before they even begin. Like this is the card that's going to be like, all right, I want to do this type of deck. And because this exists and somebody tries to capitalize on that, that deck just never takes off. So it'll be interesting to see what else comes with the patch. But this is a card I'm really looking forward to, mostly because it's staring into my soul. But
it's also been pointed out that you can actually use it to move cards from your side to their side, or and vice versa. So you can use it on the Rock Tosser card. So if someone like Rock Tosses, you can be like, here's your Rock Tosser back. And if someone like Irises, you can be like, oh, thanks for the Iris. Like there's a lot.
Whoa.
I think it's going to be.
That's actually a big game.
That's nuts.
That's big game, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to use that on Iris. That's completely bonkers.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's any situation where this card does not find value. And they exist, but like it has many. Like I think this is something that maybe overrate, underrate, but I'm rating this extremely highly because there's just situations that I feel like are going to pop up that this card always is just like, oh, cool, perfect answer.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever going to run Iris. That's that's like, I mean, if you play Iris and the opponent does this on it, that's pretty much game winning. If they have a way to kill it too, that's kind of game already. I mean, not all the time, but that's such an incredible value swing.
That definitely seems like this card's ceiling is its interaction with Iris.
Yeah, for sure. can give them
I don't
fake
know.
Siri back.
Sabrina's there. It's like, okay, how high can we push the ceiling?
Yeah. So those are the 5 cards that we actually know what they do for now. I think McBeard was saying he was going to reveal his. It looks like he hasn't done it yet, if I'm not mistaken, but he'll actually probably do it during the course of this talk show. So we'll have to come back to that when it happens. But I feel like we brushed through the cards that we mentioned before, Slizard, Peasant Leader, and Mandrake a little quickly because I kind of wanted to get to these new ones. But just going back on them real quick, Truedawn, you were saying you really, really liked the potential of Mandrake. I'd love to hear more about this. Like, what were you thinking about it with?
Well, I was just mainly referencing how preposterous the art is, but it's essentially just a giant silver Mardro. Mardro's already an incredibly situational card. I'm not sure how much the boost in power is worth both the silver slot, and just the fact that it can sometimes be dead. So I'm not sold that this card is very good. If there were still things like old Morkvarg or things where the strengthen part mattered, if you have a deck where that's a thing, then yeah, I could see this card being something you play because there's a lot of versatility in that spot. But unless you're getting value out of the strengthened, I don't imagine this being a particularly strong card.
Yeah, I actually kind of agree. Although at the same time, strengthen is it's a dangerous mechanic. I mean, it's one of the most abusable texts in the entire game. There's some sneaky stuff you can do with that. I mean, people have been saying, use it on Ceres or something like that. That has some potential. Obviously, it's lockable, but there's definitely situations where this card can add value.
One thing that is interesting is that it says it's not like a Mardro where Mardro says reset. If this is what I'm reading is correct, it says heal and then strengthen. Yes. So you can actually use this on Ekamara and it doesn't lose the boost. So if you wanted to do that, that is a thing you can do. So that's helps this card out quite a bit.
Yeah, like for example, I mean, this is you could say it's a bit of a niche situation, but this happens decently commonly, and this card sits in your hand. Like, you've got an Ekimara on board, your opponent passes when you need to overtake 5 points, you just slap this on your Ekimara, boom, you've got 6 more carryover, and you've beat the score. Like, that kind of thing is not that uncommon, and that's just good value, right? Yeah. Honestly, this card is not that bad. It feels very balanced.
Yeah. It's going to be good in the decks where it's good in. Like I said, you just need to be able to leverage the strengthen part of that.
I think the strengthening could be really good in Skellige because of obviously the options to reuse that strength with resurrects. There's definitely every faction is an Ekamara. We'll not get into that can of worms just yet. But I mean, I think the most interesting thing about this card is all of the great cosplays that we'll hopefully see. This is purely how I rate the cards on the level of cosplay available, and this one's pretty high, right?
I want to know. I want to know if it's jiggleable. If you can right click on it and
premium craft on Mandrake right from the beginning. As soon as patch hits.
Manticore Venom is jiggleable. They obviously have an organic thing going. It would just make sense.
So do you think this will have a organic tag? Do we know anything about that?
Some people have theorized it could be alchemy. I don't actually know, the intricacies of the Witcher lore behind this one. But it seems most likely it's going to be organic, I think.
Does Vesemir still pull alchemy cards? Does that card still do that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, if this card is printed as an alchemy, that's a huge deal for both this card and Vesemir. Because Vesemir has always been a card that's been so inherently powerful. I mean, the card is literally a neutral Natalis with one word different. And obviously that word makes all the difference. But as soon as there's more alchemy cards in the pool, most notably silver ones, like, for example, if this one is silver, something better than D-Bomb, Vesemir will take off in a real way.
Yeah.
I really liked Vesemir back when the Francesca meta was, the elf deck meta was a thing where you ended up with all these boosted units. Vesemir into D-Bomb was actually, I think, pretty nice. And then if you didn't need a D-Bomb, you could always run a Thunderbolt potion. And I've played him a little bit this patch, but then they nerfed that into the ground, and then he kind of got resigned to the shelf forevermore. Poor Vesemir.
Yeah, poor Vesemir.
Okay. And then probably the most talked about card out of the three we breezed over was Slizard or Slizzard. it's something that a lot of people are saying might be too strong. We did kind of brush on this, but I'd really like to hear your guys' opinions on how strong this card looks, because that's a very controversial issue. Some people are saying it looks super strong.
Well, you think about like in a Devour deck, you constantly have the ability to eat your stuff and put it in the graveyard. So even within a singular round, Slyzard allows you to gain a lot. Like you can Ekamara multiple times you otherwise might not have been able to, or like get Vran Warrior back. Or even if you're just playing a more normal deck, like you can eat your Drowner with Ekamara and then Drowner again. Like there's just a lot of versatility to this card that is something Monsters have been lacking, and I think it's just a strong card. Like if you're getting value out of the Devour trigger, it's like imagine if like Reaver Scout had like synergies with things. Like that's what this is.
Yeah,
I mean, the comparison to Reaver Scout I think is pretty apt, but I mean we're looking at 2 more strength, and you don't even have to have had the thing on the board at one time. Like, I just feel like if you're trying to like shut down, like maybe your opponent's just going big neckers and has just 3 and they don't have any more, and you manage to kill off 1 so that they can't get in between rounds, and then this guy comes out, and it's just like, oh, okay, well, great. Like you can't shut down monsters as hard as you could before against certain strategies, and also especially with the I see a lot of maybe not like with the consume, but with Death Wish. Like a lot of Death Wish cards you're going to want to pop either with your Ogre or something similar, and then it ends up in the graveyard and you want to get another one out of your deck. You have a great way of doing now, and it's a 3-point tempo play with some extra Death Wish carryover or damage or whatever it's going to end up doing. Like it's such a versatile card for monsters that I see very few ways of not running at least one, probably even 2 or 3 in any monsters deck if you're just like, I want a little bit more consistency than what I've been getting.
Yeah, it's just a huge amount of redundancy too. It's just like it's a really big game for monsters, and it also telegraphs potential new design space for Devour, because like we talked about before, it's Devour but not really. It devours something in that it does something completely different than what Devour is supposed to do, which I actually like. There's a couple cards in the game that I think should follow this mold, like the Ogre that sacrifices a thing and deals damage equal to its power to something else. Cyclops. Like that card should Devour. Like it wouldn't just make sense for that card to Devour. So you could have a thing similar to this card's templating where it would say consume a unit instead of boosting deal its damage to something else. So I think that this opens the door for retemplating of existing cards and also new design space for future cards.
Yeah.
See,
I completely agree.
My big concern with it is that are there any monsters that are that good that you want to find them guaranteed or replay them? Because the one that people most commonly play multiple times is Wild Hunt Hound, but that already has, there's already a card that target draws that, Navigator. And it doesn't have the condition of it being in your graveyard. You mentioned Ekamaras, but Ekamaras get carried over from round 1 to round 2. So Ekamaras aren't going to be in your graveyard until round 3, unless they get killed. So then it's not really smart to run it with Ekamaras, because you're assuming that your opponent's going to kill your cards, which is kind of like if they don't kill your cards, then you don't have Ekamaras in your graveyard. You can't use it to find Ekamaras. Yeah. So for me, what do you use it on? Like maybe Solano Harpies, but then you need to eat a Harpy to get there. And if you're playing Consume, you want your Vran Warrior to eat your eggs before you eat a Harpy, which is going to then take a bunch of turns because of the timer. So then that's not going into your graveyard either. So for me, the way I see it with the current state of Consume is I have absolutely no idea what it is you'd want to consume to pull more of. And so I'm not seeing the strength that maybe other people are in this card.
But
I look at it. I look at it basically as, I think the closest comparison, and we've talked about a few comparisons like Reaver Scout. I think the closest one is actually Priestess of Freya. I view it as a Freya that gives you 2 extra points and a consume trigger, but the cost is you have to have an additional unit of that type left in your deck for it to work, which is definitely a hefty cost, although 2 points is great. Now, what I love about this card, and the thing that people aren't really talking about, because I look at things from a deck building perspective, what I love about this card is that it has the kind of, I don't know if there's a term for it, but it is a kind of card that inherently you don't necessarily want to run 3 of it, right? Yeah. It's very flexible from a deck building perspective because the card design itself actually kind of incentivizes you to run like 1 or 2 of it. like Jaggers, you were talking about this card's maybe it would have a hard time finding use in like a wild hunt deck because you already have navigators. But I mean, you can always use it. You can pretty much always find a target for it in a wild hunt deck, right? In like round 2 or round 3, in a similar way as you would a Freya. You can use this on a navigator and pull out another navigator from your deck even and get even extra points that way. I don't know. I think it's a card that will be run as a 1 of or a 2 of in a good amount of situations, actually.
Yeah, it's weird that it has a consume trigger and the consume trigger not doing that, but I almost feel like it's specifically because as Jaggers was saying, like in a consume deck, there's not a lot of stuff that you want to be consuming and then pulling out again. And I see this more of like because I was someone who tried to get like a full Death Wish deck working early whenever Death Wish was like actually got a little bit more support, and it just lacked consistency. So the fact that you're able to get some consistency into Death Wish, I think makes that a more viable archetype, more as opposed to just throwing in some Death Wish cards. Like it's going to be interesting to see what people come up with for this card in a Death Wish censored deck, because there's a lot of value to be had there, I think.
Yeah, Death Wish definitely seems like one of the better archetypes for this, just because it's an archetype where you are constantly like eating your own stuff on purpose. Like you're putting your stuff into the graveyard in that round, so you'll have access to a much richer graveyard in the moment. So that would definitely seem like the best possible home for it. Some hybrid consume Death Wish type deck.
Yep. And lastly, it's not too much to talk about, but the last card we touched on was, of course, the Peasant Leader. We mentioned it's basically, I see this card as having good potential in Northern Realms and monsters, and maybe that's about it. I don't know. Anything else to add about this one, guys?
Do we know if the cows are beasts? Because that seems like nonsense.
They almost certainly are, although if anything, this is even more indication that Harpy will probably be nerfed.
Yeah.
Which we kind of already assumed going into this.
Yeah. Like round 6 million of things that get pulled from the deck for free being busted. So, yeah. Well, we'll see what happens with that. If obviously, if things stayed as they were, this card with Harpy would be completely bonkers. But even without that, it just like auto-enabling Commander's Horn is a big deal. Like you can keep this in Horn for round 3 and have a 2-card round 3 that's super strong. You could just play it normally. Like this thing's interaction with siege support is absurd. Like just making multiple bodies, as we've seen, is like super good. So
yeah, I didn't think they'd put 5 bodies on a neutral card.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't actually think it's super busted. I think it really allows for a swarming and empowers the swarming monsters. But beyond that, I mean, it's basically, in terms of like it's a capacity to be played on monsters. Forget the Harpy synergy, because we're kind of assuming Harpies gets nerfed in some undeterminate way. But it's still kind of just a worse fire elemental, right? You have 1 more unit, but you don't get the zaps. I guess it's about the same as fire.
You don't need like opposing more things unit, in play, so like
1 more unit, you can play it proactively. 1 less point, but 1 more unit in a swarm deck. Actually, you know what? This is better than Firely in a swarm deck, I guess.
It also all goes same row, right? Yeah, they're all same row, so you just get to auto horn. Yeah, so it's really close to Firely though. Like there's definitely a lot of similarities there.
The things I kind of notice about this card is I think it could be quite useful in a Fringilla deck, because you get those 2/1 strength cows, so you can use that to set up some targets for whatever you want to do with Fringilla, with say Decoy or Amir or something like that. So there, I see it's quite interesting, and also the fact that it gives you 5 units in a row. I'm thinking at the moment, kind of positioning left to right is not, I would say, hugely impactful in Gwent in terms of where you position your units in relation to other units. But this also gives you the option to force 2 units at least 5 spaces apart, right? So then if you have cards that have effects on a card +1 next to it, or negative effects on a card +1 next to it, then this gives you an option to space those cards out and give you some sort of protection as well. So considering more things are becoming agile, and CDPR have said that there's a reason for this coming in the future, I think in some ways one of the most interesting things about this card is the fact that you can use it for spacing units.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yep. I like this card just from the neutral perspective that, I mean, there's already decks that have existing swarm archetypes. Monsters and Northern Realms come to mind immediately. But due to the fact that this is going to be neutral card, just 5 bodies is a lot of bodies in 1 card. it's going to be interesting to see if something else comes out of this besides the obvious, besides Northern Realms, besides monsters like Scoia'tael suddenly wants to like swarm or something. Like it's going to be cool to see from a deck building perspective. It's a lot of flexibility where now you're just able to think, maybe I want to try and like just get a bunch of bodies on the board. Do I benefit from that? And there could be something that I can't think of right now that really does want that to happen and benefits from it. But it's going to be a wait and see card, I think, for me to see. Just it seems initially pretty good, but overall, like I want to know what happens after we get our hands on it for a bit.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. A lot of people are looking at the card's ability and saying, oh, this is kind of simple. It's kind of boring. Well, to me, the thing I notice first and foremost is that it's a neutral card. And neutral cards are inherently so many more times interesting from a deck building perspective. When they're cards that, just make you think about like what combos you can do, they allow you to, and like I said, don't get me wrong, I think this card will pretty much only be viable in Monsters and Northern Realms right off the bat, but it represents more deck building space in the future, right? Like something like Scoia'tael or Nilfgaard, for example, might only be like one or two more tools off of being able to try their own kind of swarmy sort of deck. And this is just another tool in their kit that enables that. And I think that's really great. Anyway, in addition to these cards that we also have a bunch of cards that we don't actually know exactly what they do yet, but we've seen their art. Now, these are Avlak the Sage, Gedinith Fleminica.
It's not a real name. It's not a real name. It's art words.
And Hefty Helge, which is, of course, the Silver Machine, and Mahakam Mead. Those are the four that they showed us. Was this yesterday? I think it was yesterday, if I remember correctly.
I think so, yeah.
And, of course, there's not much to say about these cards, but we can speculate just a little bit. Yeah, we can speculate just a little bit about them. The first thing that catches my eye personally is that the Mahakam Mead is almost certainly going to be an alchemy card, right? Because alcohols were used in alchemy in The Witcher 3.
Yeah.
Do we agree about that?
Alcohol is essentially just a potion too.
Yeah.
So it makes sense.
I mean, if we're assuming that, and this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about Vesemir, I mean, alchemy cards are in a position where if this card is good, it can quite immediately turn Vesemir and Vicovaro Novice, the Nilfgaard alchemy card, into like real competitive cards. Yeah. It's definitely possible.
I'm pretty sure they're real cards now.
Do we think it's going to have like a effect that it's similar to what we saw during the Alefest, like a weather type effect? Because I mean, they did do all the animations for like the frothy board and everything, and as evidence here, CDPR don't like to waste art. Yeah. So I'm wondering if they like that. It's the similar stance on board effects, and potentially this could be something where you see a cool frothy effect on the board. Whether that persists or whether it just does that when you play it, do we have any kind of ideas about this? Like, I feel like it's probably going to be a row effect.
I mean, I think
it's definitely possible.
Weather.
Yeah, I think it's a hard lock to buff in some fashion. Like, it's definitely doing that, and it would be consistent with like the previous iteration. We saw the card for it to do it row wide. It would also be a cool expansion of design space to have like essentially positive weather, something you put on your own row that buffs stuff every turn. I would definitely like to see it do something like that, and I think it's likely to do something like that.
Yep. So anything else to mention about these card arts? Obviously, there's not too much you can speculate on their art apart from something like that, talking about the tag. Obviously, the Avalak card being a gold neutral with a low body, you can assume some powerful effect is going to be slapped on there. Yeah.
You and your opponent both discard 2 cards. It's like the opposite of regular Avalak. You throw 2 away, they throw 2 away.
Oh. That'd be so bad. Oh, that'd be so bad.
Oh my god.
Skellige's new best
friend.
Let's not do that.
Are you sure? Like, okay, oh my god, it would be hilarious. And then if you both play them, and then you just like it's like speed Gwent basically.
Yeah, Avalok's tiny body definitely like telegraphs that he has a super strong external effect. It's either going to be some kind of deck manipulation similar to Gale's or his previous iteration, or maybe he can function more like a mage, which he is one, right? He's a mage thematically. So he can maybe pull from silver spells, like similar to Kirametz, something like that. So, like it's going to do cool stuff. I hope it's a modal card. I hope it's like a mage and like one of the options Scorch or something. So that'd be cool. But yeah, that card is going to be very interesting.
Oh yeah, if it's a modal card, like a neutral mage that can cast like high power spells, that would actually be quite interesting. I didn't actually think of that.
Yeah, I think one of the options is definitely like mage with silver spells.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'd be very interested to see that. If they're gonna do that, they would have like very underused silver spells typically, kind of like how mages use more underused bronze spells. And Karametz, has Aeromancy, which is an underused silver, so they'd have to tack on some stuff like that. And then the last thing,
necromancy, aeromancy,
necromancy, definitely necromancy for sure.
All the mancies.
Yeah.
And anyway, if nobody else has anything to speculate about these 4 cards, because of course it's just art, we have at this time got our 6th card reveal with its full effect that we can talk about. And this is McBeard's revealed card, the Crow's Eye. Now, this is a bronze special card, and it reads, damage the highest enemy on each row by 4. Increase the damage dealt by 1 for each copy of this card in your graveyard to a maximum of 10 damage.
That sounds complicated.
Whoa.
Yeah, that does sound complicated. So you would want a tiny thing on your board and a big thing on their board to make it different, is the joke, right? Because it deals the same damage to both.
No, it only damages the enemy's board.
Oh, I thought you said both. Okay, never mind.
No, highest enemy on the...
Oh, okay. Never mind.
So basically, what this is it's kind of like, you can think of it sort of like a Mahakam Pyrotechnician, right? Pyrotech has a 5 body and damages by 3. This has a 0 body and damages by 4. So it's a 12 instead of a 14 that requires an even more stringent requirement, which is hitting like slightly higher strength units. But it increases the damage dealt by 1 for each copy of this card in your graveyard. And in addition to that, it damages the highest enemy, not a random one, which means it has a harder time actually whiffing in the same way Pyrotech can if it just randomly hits a 1.
Yeah, this card's like...
Did Bursa start playing Spellitel?
Yeah, this is going to function in the same way like Mahakam Pyrotechnician does in the Scoia'tael movement decks, but you could play it a lot differently. Like, that deck has to build the whole package with the 2-drop dwarf that makes a copy, and in this one you could play it in Spellitel. Like, you can have all the spell synergies and it functions in a very similar way. You would probably want some kind of movement cards to synergize with it to set things up potentially, or at least like Marigold's Hailstorm to punish people for playing around it. But this card definitely seems pretty strong in certain situations.
Now, what I want to know is, why does it say to a maximum of 10 damage? Is there even a way to get like 6 of these in your graveyard?
I mean, that would seem to telegraph a desire to make copy effects in the future. Like,
or they already have.
Yeah, or something
more
like that.
More cards in this set. Yeah. I mean, I don't think they would have that unless they already had cards in the set or cards they were planning to utilize that did something like that. And that's very interesting. That little thing is a bit telling.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, you wouldn't put that there if you didn't have things that copied stuff in the game or planned to put them in the game.
So this is it's a pretty interesting one to evaluate. Is this an organic card? I mean, it's Crow's Eye, right? Is that like a plant? I think that's a plant, isn't it?
It's a picture of plants, but it's also a picture of a crow. It's unclear.
Yeah, but it's not a picture of the crow's eyes, so I'm confused.
Yeah. Misleading art.
Yeah. So it's an organic, which means you can expect synergy with Herbalist and nothing else.
Listen, Herbalist is going to get there one day.
Yeah.
Herbalist tries its best.
So it's a neutral, right?
Yeah. It's a neutral
and it's
spell.
A spell.
Yeah, it's kind of like you can think of it sort of like a Manticore venom, or sorry, Arrakis venom, but it positions vertically instead of horizontally almost. And of course, it can increase its. I feel like it's basically a better version of Arrakis venom, sort of.
I feel like it's almost. I mean, we know that an agile update's coming. We know that the tech update's coming, so it's going to be. I feel like it's almost a card that's like going to be interesting because the comparison to Arrakis Venom I think is very apt. Like it's it's not punishing playing all in the same row. It's punishing playing on all different rows. And we already have a couple of cards that do that. We already have Gold Weather that does that. We already have like White Frost and other things that punish for playing on multiple rows like that. So I think that, like, from a base aspect of the card, we're looking at this going up to 6/6/6 at the end.
Yep.
Right, if it's the third card played.
Yeah, if it's the third one, then
currently,
it's
assuming
points.
no other copy effects at this point.
18 points for a bronze is something.
Yeah, that's just a lot.
If you can get that, you run it. The question is, can you get it?
A lot of mitigating factors.
Yeah,
like you
exactly.
need 2 things in the yard. You need a thing on each row. You need a thing with 6 or more on each row. Like, the ceiling's high, and I do think, like, this is a card you could play in a deck like Spelltell, a more controlling version, just because of the way it interacts with Marigold's Hailstorm. Like, you either play around this or Marigold's Hailstorm, and you get blown up by the other. So,
Yeah.
just like creating that catch-22 is like just a good deck building.
Ethne
Well, it's not even
resurrects,
that.
right? She doesn't duplicate. So
She
you
does
can't
not
get another
duplicate.
version with her. You can get another version with a Glaze, and you could also get other versions if monsters decided to play Griffins and put more of them in your graveyard
Yeah.
for lols. Like, I'm just trying to think of ways that you can get
I
extra
think
spells.
the maximum amount. I mean, you can get one from Aglaeus, right? And that's it, right? So the
Yep.
maximum amount in the current game, without doing anything weird like johnnying into a second Aglaeus, would be 7, right? In terms of 7 damage, you can get
Yes.
7 damage if you play a 4th one.
Unless you're
And it's only if your opponent's playing them as well, and you have maybe
Yeah.
your Griffins or something.
Yeah,
There
No,
must
like,
be some
try
kind
and-
of card
It's
synergizes then.
it's
it's
weird.
got to
that-
be telling that last sentence says
Yeah.
that. Like
I
there
think it's
has
for-
to be some.
But
I almost
I
want to ignore that last sentence though for now, because I mean it's I know it's got us all just like, okay, how the heck do you do that? But even ignoring that completely, a 9 damage as long as they're playing on all the rows, then 12. 12, and then wait, math, then 15. Wait, it's 12, then 15, then 18. There we go. I started off low. It's going to be really cool from a playstyle perspective, almost like a deck building perspective and a playstyle perspective. Like if you're playing that control type deck where you're like, all right, I want to punish you. If you're playing on all the rows, I want to punish you. You're playing on one row. Like it's going to be a really cool mind game going on where you're just like, all right, I want you to play something on all the rows so that I get this value, but I don't want to like try and lead you that direction. And maybe if I'm playing this and you start stacking rows, like counter with some Lacerates or Marigold Hailstorm or something, like it's going to be really fun to play with and play against. I think it's going to be fun mind games.
you could run one and be like, oh, look, like to encourage them to roast stack and then secretly have like 3 Lacerates instead. The thing, maybe they have something where you can duplicate special cards in your graveyard. Because I feel like this isn't going to be a card where you play it 7 times. Like that just seems absurdly strong. But there may be some way of buffing it by duplicating special cards in your graveyard. I don't know if that's something that
Actually,
they're going down, but
Chat, do you have a way of getting multiples of these Magni Division?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's possible they just had it, but
For
even
that,
Manga
yeah.
Division pretty much can't exceed the 10 limit anyway. Like, because they let's say they play 4 Manga Divisions, that sets at exactly 210. Yeah. So it's possible they just had it there as a precaution, but it's funny regardless. I mean, if you're getting 30 points out of it, you're not very unhappy.
Yeah, just like it becomes a Manticore Venom on each row.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a pretty interesting card. I kind of like the design of it, honestly, in terms of like the specific, like what they're willing to do with this keyword, the fact that it kind of gets better the more you play it. I don't know. Like we're talking a lot about this card. What do we think like the bottom line in terms of like, let's say competitive viability? Like, do we think this card is going to be competitive in any decks? Spelltell maybe? I don't know. What do you guys think?
You would need to do a fair amount of deck building around it. Like
Yeah.
you would need to have like Spelltell seems like the best home, but even then you would either need to create tension with the Marigold's Hailstorm or have your own like Dwarven mercenaries to move stuff accordingly to set it up. So I think it's powerful when everything goes right, but everything does not go right that often. So I'm not super sold on it, but I could definitely see it seeing play.
I like it in movement Squirtle as well.
Yeah.
As opposed to stacking all their units on one rows, you just spread them out, which you're doing. Like it synergizes really nicely with weather, like Gold Weather, for example, because then you're wanting to spread their units out so they get hit by weather. So then if you spread the units out anyway, being able to then hit all of the units for 4 or 5 or what have you gives you, I think, a decent amount of control.
Yeah, there's a weird tension between this card and Mahakam Pyrotechnician, though.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Because this card has inherently the most synergy with Scoia'tael based on not only spell but also movement.
Yeah,
but it's also in the
similar.
faction that it already kind of has this effect in.
Yeah, so you would really need to want it to be a spell instead of a creature for whatever reason.
Yeah. Yeah, and that makes me think Scoia'tael. Because even if you're using this in movement, the Pyrotech is only 2 points more than the default state of this, but that's when you're not including the Agitator on the Pyrotech either. When you're talking about Agitator into Pyrotech, then you need to play a third one of these to outvalue that, and that's a bit committal at that point.
Yeah.
But usually in movement, if you're running dwarves, you want to be running mercenaries so you can move units rather than pyrotechs. So then your agitators are for mercenaries, so you can't run pyrotechs, and this gives you an alternate.
No, that's fair.
That is fair.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely something people will experiment with. I personally, my hopes are a little low, but honestly, I'd love to be wrong. I mean, it's a very interesting card.
I wonder if decks that do we even have decks that just have like some spare bronze slots right now? So I feel like those are getting tighter and tighter.
Yeah, bronze slots are very tight.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, like, if you could just run this as a 3 of, like, if you just are like, hey, I'm building this deck and I have 3 extra bronze slots, let's just throw these in there. How many times are they going to normally find good value for you? Like, if your opponent's just completely not expecting it, they're maybe just playing on different rows just because, like, it's in the similar vein of Thunderbolt Potion, but the fact or Rakkus Behemoth or Rakkus Venom, but I guess like it maybe is a little bit easier to get the value off of since you're requiring 3 units on different rows as opposed to like Rakkus Venom requiring it all on the same row.
And Rakkus Venom requiring those units all before or more.
Yeah. Like you're just it seems like a very easy way of just getting consistent points out of a bronze card. So I wouldn't be surprised to see this this card just pop up in random decks randomly. Like it's like, oh, I've just got an extra slot or 2. I'll go ahead and throw 2 of these, and I'm not even caring about trying to get like full 18 value off this thing. I just want 12 value. I just want 15 value, like something like that. There's decks that could use that.
Yeah. What you said about like bronze slots though is interesting because that's something other card games have run into, and it's going to be interesting with Gwent, especially because they have like an explicit limit on the cards you can play. Is when you add new sets, it's hard to have them break in because the first set established like the bedrock of what everything does. Like Priestess of Freya, Emissary, Owls of Thunder, those are all like bedrock cards of like what they're supposed to be doing. Like there's like be better versions of those. So a lot of a deck is already like kind of locked in, like there's not going to be a better option for that. So it's just going to be hard for stuff to break in without being busted. So it's going to be interesting to see how they balance that tension because it's something a lot of other card games have had problems with as well.
Yeah, there's one other thing about this card as well, which is of course the organic tag. It's possible there's a bit of organic synergy, even going as far as, I mean, we saw a new Skellige bronze card, which was a lady with a bear, and it's possible she's supposed to be some kind of sister to Herbalist in a way, where they're trying to push. I mean, that's kind of speculative at that point, but who knows? Some organic synergy could easily push this card a little bit ahead, which is pretty much the only thing it needs.
Yeah, you just need a reason to play this over Pyrotechnician. So.
Yep. So those are all the new cards. We've seen 6 new cards in terms of actual abilities. We've seen 5 more arts in terms of the 4 we just showed, plus Hattori as well. And they're looking pretty great. I'm very excited for this, especially Slizard and Muzzle. Those 2 are really interesting cards, if not maybe possibly a little strong. But anyway, in addition to, of course, talking about what's going to be coming in the patch itself is presumably going to be happening at roughly the same time as the end of the season, which is only 4 days away. They did confirm that, I believe, yesterday, that the end of the season would be on the 30th. Anybody, any of you guys doing anything for the end of the season? Any goals for trying to play, pro ladder, trying to play ranked in that time? I
need my dragons. Where are my dragons? Like, I tried to do it today and I just tanked. It was awful. So but I have 4 days. I thought I only had 2 days. That's great. I have way more days than I thought. Yeah.
Nice. I need to get GM. I've been kind of fapping around. I'm sitting at 4250, so it's not like unachievable. It's not like I'm like, I don't know, 3,800. Like, oh, I'll get GM this season. Like, I'm at 4,250 at the moment. So I just need to kind of sit down and do it. The problem is, at this stage, everyone else is doing that as well. So
Yeah,
that
now
just means you have people to play against.
Yeah. But on the flip side, Pro Ladder, I kind of didn't really try, and now I've just been playing Pro Ladder to try and get enough points so they don't kick me out of the Pro Ladder. Which means I've been playing Skellige Restore Cows, which is not going very well. I think I lost every single game I played yesterday. It was quite impressive. So for me, Pro Ladder is like, I'm that player that everyone hates because they're not playing meta deck. So you come up against them and you're like, what the hell is this person doing? I have no idea like how to predict them. Like I don't know what to
do. It's a little early. It's not Christmas yet. You're gonna be gifting all this MMR away.
Pretty much. But the Cows has been fun, and yeah, I need to get my GM. Hopefully, I'm not so fussed about borders. I can live without them.
I
can't. Dale, nope. You got plans?
I'd like to ideally reach GM as well. I think I'm hovering around like 4,300 or so. So it's close-ish. But as far as Pro Ladder goes, like I just kind of pushed it off and pushed it off and pushed it off, and I was like, okay, cool, 4 days left. So I'm still debating on like if I just need to pull an all-nighter and like just not get kicked out, but see how worth it that ends up being. But no, we'll try and push for GM, I think.
Yeah. I mean, if you get GM, in theory, you shouldn't get kicked out of the Pro Ladder anyway. In theory.
It's actually what they do is they boost you up and then they kick you out. Yeah. Oh man, I hope that's not how it works.
Yep. So Dale, you we brushed on this earlier, but you just got back from TwitchCon. Now you were there, as I understand, you were there. You saw McBeard, Mithranor, and I think there was one other person that I might be forgetting.
Outstar Walker.
Yeah, Outstar Walker. Yeah. I'm a fan. So you had this little TwitchCon thing. Now I've never been. How was that?
How was it that you've never been?
No, your experience. It's how did you have a blast?
I had a blast for sure. That was I was debating for the longest time, like, all right, is this something that because I didn't go last year. I'd gotten invited out by a couple of friends, so like, hey, you should go, and I'm like, I don't know, it doesn't seem like it'd be super fun, but I'm glad I was proven wrong, like crazily wrong this time around. I had a ton of fun. Got to meet up with McBearded and Mithranor, as you said, and also Outstar Walker. Also, there were some CDPR employees on the floor as well, which I was not I wasn't expecting Outstar Walker. I wasn't expecting CDPR, so I got to meet up with them as well, and it was just amazing. Like getting to see people, like I don't know, like you see like this part of me. And I see that part of you, and I'm like, oh wait, legs. This is cool.
Oh my god, people have legs.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't have legs.
Oh.
Spoiler
I feel
alert.
discriminated against.
Oh my god, Dale. How...
I will not apologize.
Why would you do that?
Taking a hard stance.
How do you feel about IRL streamers and parties? Let's ask the
IRL
meaningful
streamers.
questions.
Oh man,
IRL streamers and Twitch
streamers
parties.
and parties. I know there was a lot of controversy around that.
Wait, what was the controversy for those of us that are?
So for anyone unfamiliar with the controversy, IRL streamers went to TwitchCon and IRL streamed, which should really come as no surprise to anybody. But they were getting upset. There was some controversy about where they were streaming at. And namely, I feel like a lot of it came from there were a couple of private parties. You had to get an invitation to go to them. And they IRL streamed from there. And that's where I think people were really hit or miss. Like, is this just supposed to be a place to relax and have fun? Or should I expect to be on someone's stream? And I think that because it was invitation only is really where people, like, no one really had a good idea of what was the correct way to go about it. What was the actual, like, what was the morally right thing to do? So hopefully, you know, Twitch recognizes this and just has a better guideline for next year. Yeah. Just like, hey, this is how it's going to be. But you know, it was, personally, I wasn't affected that much.
But you mean people didn't want to like stick their cameras in your face and be like, "This is Dale from the Gwentlemen Podcast, everyone. He's come all the way to TwitchCon. We're so excited."
Maybe one day.
I'll become an IRL streamer.
I was thinking about doing some IRL streaming.
if I ever get to that point that someone wants to do that, I'd be like, holy crap! Like, should I be upset? I don't even know. Like, I'm recognized. This is cool. And speaking of, there was a guy actually I was wearing my G-Men shirt on the show floor on Friday, and that was one of my better experiences of just walking around and somebody taps me. He's like, going on? I'm like, yes, it's happened.
Nice. See, I guess the thing I would say about that is if you've ever been to gaming events, often when they have after parties, like, gamers get drunk, like really really drunk. Like I don't think I've ever been to a party that can be quite as messy as an after party from a gaming event, especially if there's free booze involved. And so I can kind of understand why maybe people were kind of uncomfortable about it, but it's maybe something that should have been expected considering the fact that it is, you know, it's Twitch, so that's what people do.
Yeah. I have no IRL streaming hot takes.
You don't fancy it?
Yeah, honestly, you know, maybe I'll get into it one day.
So you got next year, man. Next year, if I head out there and I see you and Truedawn and Jagaris, like, I'm expecting all of you now.
You know what? Maybe you know what? Maybe I'll go to TwitchCon next year.
We'll IRL stream the whole experience. It's going to be fantastic. I'll be like, and here's Swim in a ball pit, because you've not seen that before.
God. Well, you didn't tell me there was a ball pit.
I don't know. Was there a ball pit, Dale?
There was not a ball pit. I'm sure someone could have found one.
If they install a ball pit, I'll go. Okay.
Makes all the difference.
Well, is there a ball pit con? Like, there's a con for everything. There has to be a con for ball pits, right?
Yeah. Like ball pit connoisseurs to just meet up and exchange details.
Yeah.
I don't want to go to
strive
BallCon.
to remain.
Put that one out there right now.
We strive to remain wholesome on this talk show.
Dude, ball pits are among the most wholesome of topics.
Listen, we showed Mandrake. Everything goes now.
See, you guys need to stop saying ball pit, because now there's a thing, like, because you have armpits, and now then you're saying ball pit, and I'm just getting a bit grossed out. So let's just move on and talk about someone else.
Okay, well, the last thing that people are really talking about right now is, of course, GwentSlam 2. Now, you know, if you've been to Reddit, you might have seen a little bit of controversy with Metronos.
Controversy on Reddit? No, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, I think it happens when people are bored, and I think the fact that there's like 6 new creds to talk about means people have pretty much already forgotten about it. But yeah, GwentSlam 2 is gonna be this weekend. Of course, you know, the people that are going are kind of already leaving. I was talking about McBeard earlier. I was saying he might not have been able to actually release his leak because he's gonna be traveling pretty much now. But yeah, we have GwentSlam 2, and of course, now I don't have a list of the people going. Ooh, I should have one of those. If I was prepared, I would have one of those. But I know Freddie is going. I know Randy is going. I know JJ
Game King is on there too.
Is going. Game
Adzakov.
King.
Is Adzakov going?
Azakov's going.
Is Tailbot going?
Tailbot is going. I remember most of this.
Yeah, I'm
from
great at this.
The breakdown I did on our podcast.
Well,
so I remember
that's
most
6 people. Yeah.
Let's write a list. JJ, Freddie.
Ooh.
Wait,
look at this.
Right. So who won the tournament? That was Randy, and who else? There was someone else. Dieu, but he didn't get in.
Yeah, and
then
got
who won the
replaced by
second one?
Metronos.
Does anyone
No, he got
see that
replaced by
McBeard
JJ,
tweet?
didn't he? Oh no, JJ's in right. He got replaced by Metro, someone or other. Okay, and then there was one other qualified through the tournament.
Hang on.
Yeah, that
won the
McBeard
tournament
tweet is
McBeard
something to
tweeted-
talk about.
Ooh, guys, we're gonna have to put this on hold. Let's return to GwentSlam in a moment. Update on Crow's Eye. I have a source telling me that Crow's Eye is both organic and alchemy. That is huge information because not only does it establish that Crow's Eye is both, but it means cards have a precedent if they are in the Witcher 3 lore, both organic plants that are alchemy ingredients. That's a precedent that those cards are going to be both organic and alchemy, which means Mandrake's odds of being alchemy just went up like several hundred percentages.
Hashtag math. But yeah, that's awesome. Like, that card's super good.
Yeah.
So you can Vesemir Crow's-Eye.
Yes.
You can use Vikavara Novice on Crow's-Eye too.
Yeah, but why would you use Vikavara Novice when you can use Vesemir?
That's not even that useful. Man. So, I mean, does that have implications on anything else? I mean, clue me in, please. I don't play the Witcher series. Is Mandrake like an alchemy ingredient type plant?
Yeah, it's an alchemy ingredient like every game that appears in pretty much. Yeah, it's just
cool.
like in real life, it is an alchemy. It's like a plant that you put into stuff.
What about marjoram? Is marjoram an alchemy ingredient?
Isn't it like a fungus?
Mushrooms. It's just mushrooms,
It's
right?
just mushrooms.
I mean, I'm sure you could put it in something. I don't know the result.
I mean,
anything's an alchemy ingredient if you're brave enough, man.
Yeah, in Witcher, Gwent, all you do is run around picking herbs and then you make them into potions. So in Witcher, every plant is basically an alchemy ingredient. You're like puffball, like mushrooms, alchemy ingredient. Like this random daisy I found on the way, alchemy ingredient. Like literally everything. Yeah. Monster size, alchemy ingredient. Like basically, if it comes from the land in some way, shape, or form, it's an alchemy ingredient.
Dude, they should make because I played Witcher 3 and I remember Drowner brains were alchemy ingredient, so they should make Drowners alchemy cards. And like half the monster cards in the game are just alchemy cards. I mean, it would only make sense, honestly.
Yeah, because Vesemir throwing Drowners at people.
I really like that it's gotten at least somewhat confirmed on the organic tag. It's mostly just because Herbalist with Skellige, like right now, every now and then I think you'll see Herbalist come out with the Lacerate just because it's the only decent thing Herbalist can do. And giving her the opposite, like instead of horizontal vertical, like it's going to be cool doing some mind games because I think it's the other faction that can really take advantage of that movement with those harpooners, where you're just trying to, like normally you want a row stack and that's why the Lacerate's good, but like maybe you start off with this, but you can just get the value, and you're not going to get like if they're trying to counterplay you can counterplay them back with the Bamboozle Crow's-Eye or something.
That's actually true. Yeah, you could get some sneaky value with that on the early days of the patch, and people will like spread their units out naturally against Skellige.
Get them.
Okay, so that's a really cool update. That's definitely. Yep. That's already just a buff to these alchemy cards, and it just means that. Man, that's a big deal. It means like every alchemy ingredient they ever print, and I mean, there's a lot of those in The Witcher. That means they're probably both going to have alchemy and organic. So both of those tags are kind of a lot better already, just because of that.
I'm not sure if they're always going to have both. I think this yes, this sets a precedence, but I wonder if it's just giving them the flexibility where it's like, all right, this one we think is fine to be both. Like the synergies between alchemy and between organic cards are fine, but it still lets them decide, maybe we just want this in alchemy even though it's organic, or maybe we just want this in organic. Like,
yeah, this lets them choose cards that they like. It gives them an extra knob to turn on stuff that they wouldn't otherwise have.
Yeah,
like I always thought organic was more things like like Lacerate is like a swipe and attack, and like Blood Curdling Roar is like it's a noise. Like they're not necessarily actual plants or animals, but more like things that plants and animals do. That was kind of how I looked at it, but. Obviously, with
that kind of makes some sense.
Organic's a bit of a weird terminology because it makes you think, things that are like, plants or animals or that, like nature. But it's not necessarily that.
It could just be like a Pokemon attack or something. You're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, tackle.
Yeah, so anyway, I guess now that we've got that little update, going back to GwentSlam, where were we? We were talking about GwentSlam.
We were talking about who was there.
We're trying to figure out who was there.
JJ, Freddy, Randy, Metronos, Game King, Adzakov, Tailbot, and Andy Wand. He was the one I forgot.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, Andy.
So, I mean, out of those, I mean, how many of us are familiar with, how many of them, right? I personally don't know a majority of the names on the list in terms of like knowing them as more than a name, right? Like knowing like what to maybe expect from them. Do we have any high expectations for not necessarily people that are going to do well, but also people that might do well, people that might bring, some unique spicy stuff. Game King, I hear he likes the spicy stuff.
Yeah, Game King definitely telegraphed some spice when we had him on the podcast earlier. He teased some potential interesting decks, and he's definitely one of the people I'd put as a favorite to win the tournament. He practices extremely well. He's very good. He has a good network, which is important when you're testing for events like this. You need to be able to play against people who are very good, getting good testing. So anyone who has a support group like that is going to definitely have a big edge. It'll also be interesting to see how Adzikov handles himself in the redux of the GwentSlam tournament, because I know he struggled a bit in the first one. It was his first live event after having success in the ladder. So now he's hopefully accustomed to that and might have a much easier time in that environment second time around.
Yeah, I think that's something people really don't talk about. Like, I think that's a brilliant point. Like, there are people like Adzikov that, don't have experience with these events, but they have this opportunity to, acclimate, to really learn how to deal with the pressure, because it really is the pressure. And I'd love to see him perform. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's fair to say. I think LAN experience is really important. And this is kind of like LAN light in that you don't have a crowd, because I think that's another thing that plays into esports is the impact of the crowd. Because even if you have those kind of like noise cancelling, super big earphone things on, you can often still hear people shouting. You just don't know exactly what they're shouting. Whereas obviously at the life coach events, at these kind of GwentSlam events, there's a much smaller crowd, but it's still a live event. You still have that kind of pressure aspect. And I guess your surroundings aren't the same as, say, when you sit at home and you play through TGO or something, and you're in your own house, you can go to the bathroom, you can go get a drink, like you can kind of like be in your pajamas for if you want. Like it's a completely different kind of atmosphere.
I should have done that.
But I think it's something that people don't expect to be as impactful as it is.
Yeah, it's interesting because this event in particular, it's a little bit more casual because it's at Life Coach's house. That's one of the reasons why I was skeptical if that would transfer over to that, whether people would feel that pressure that is traditionally present for a live event, like that would be at the Gamescom tournament, for instance. But yeah, it definitely seemed like just being among that elite group of peers still presented a large amount of pressure for some people, and they were not prepared for that.
So I guess
my money's gonna have to be going towards Randy for this tournament for sure. I didn't get a chance to see the show match between him and Freddie, so I still need to watch that.
It's pretty close.
So, but for me, while I'll always be rooting for him. Dog aggro. He was actually my main practice partner in the original Challenger qualifiers, and we both made it through day one of that hellish Swiss. And then he knocked me out round two. So he also got knocked out that day two as well. So he still owes me for knocking me out of that tournament. He needs to win something. So this is it. Go Randy. You owe me this.
I think he knocked me out of Challenger qualies too. He was one of my limbs. Yeah. So I mean, honestly, that's that Dale is saying, Randy. I mean, if we have to pick someone who's our favorite to win, Jagras, did you say Game King?
No, I just said that I think Game King will be because him and Adzikov have had some experience that should help them. Whereas
if you had to pick a favorite,
Tailbot and Andy, favorite is in the one I think is most likely to win.
Yeah,
I think Super JJ.
Ooh.
He probably hangs out at Life Coach's house all the time, in my head. So he's in the most. This is basically like him playing from home, so he's got the edge.
Yeah, this is literally what he does to climb ladder. He's probably sitting in the same seat.
Yeah, honestly, I actually agree. If I had to put it, Super JJ. Super JJ is a very solid player.
Yes. Yeah, him and Game King seem like the two strongest players going into it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Definitely, of course. Now these are all very, very strong players, so and anyone really could win this. But I think that's absolutely fair. So in addition to all of that, we also have the Challenger qualifiers that are being held on November 11th and 12th, and they're now best of 3 instead of best of 1. Now that was one of the things that CDPR got some flack about. They announced them as best of 1, and like with a lot of other things, they showed that they just were willing to make that swap based on that community feedback.
Yeah, that's a really good change. If you have a ability to like just the time for the tournament to do that, it's definitely worth doing just to improve the competitive integrity of it to make sure people don't get like RNG'd out or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, not running 40 card full tests and just high rolling the whole time through.
I agree. I think also having the Swiss into a bracket kind of helps eliminate the impact of the coin flip. But if you're running best of ones, that kind of negates that to a certain extent. Whereas if you're running best of threes, obviously you need to lose 3 times and you're out. But then that's across basically up to 9 games, which helps to ameliorate that just a little bit. Whereas if you're doing best of ones, in 3 games you could lose all 3, and that kind of can make your life more difficult, and it kind of adds a little more randomness to the result than necessarily skill. So in my opinion, best of threes are better, even though it's more time consuming. I think if you're the kind of person who wants to compete, then the fact that it's time consuming shouldn't necessarily be a factor.
Oh, absolutely. If anything, it's kind of it's
though.
Part of the skill, even like to be able to have the endurance to play for so many hours on end and not drop focus.
Yeah, that's actually like a big part of it.
I just hope that the admins are prepared.
Yeah.
So like, because it is like going from a best of 1 to a best of 3. That tournament is easily like doubled or tripled its time commitment from everybody involved. So it's shout out to CDPR for reiterating on that community feedback. Though I do agree, best of 3s are the way to go, but that is a significant time investment if you're trying to go for the challengers or if you're for whoever their admins are. So kudos to them for making it best of 3s, but it's going to take some time.
It's definitely doable. Like Magic has their Grand Prix and stuff that are like best of 3 games with like 2,000 people. Like those are 2 days event, but you can do it on a single day with it like 200 or so. So there's places you could learn from if you're like new to organizing these types of events. There's precedent.
How do we feel like the banning of trackers is going to affect players?
Hugely. Like that's something that you need to, if you're trying to be the best you can be at the game, you need to learn to play without a tracker. A, because they're going to be banned in tournaments, and B, it makes you lackadaisical. Like you count on the tracker to do a lot of stuff that you should be doing yourself, and it doesn't like work out like your brain. It's your brain needs to like be doing stuff constantly, or else it'll like not be good at it. I'm doing a poor job of articulating this, but it's like it's just like like working out. Like if you don't work out, like you'll get fat, and if you don't like think a lot, it's kind of the same thing. So the tracker does a lot for people, and it makes them lackadaisical and worse.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the biggest things is that I think it's definitely possible to play without a tracker by being prepared. Write it down on a piece of paper, and you can kind of emulate not having a tracker. But at the same time, the problem with that is it takes a little bit more time if you're not used to it. And time is actually a really important resource in this. Like an extra, say, 10 seconds every turn to be able to think about the best possible play will make a difference in how you play. But anyway, in addition to the GwentSlam and in addition to the Challenger qualifiers, we also have our own little Gwentlemen's Open, which we have a very special edition of it coming up. We are calling it TGO Harvest, presented by Matthew J. Clarty, who contributed $500 towards the event. So it's going to have a larger prize pool than normal. And this is the last of the Gwentlemen's Open series for the time being, because we initially had it as a series. This is our 8th one, and it's going to determine the last TGO champion. We were planning to do 8 of these at the first, and we were going to have all 8 champions of all 8 TGOs compete in the ultimate TGO champion closed tournament at the end of the year. And I'm sure we'll be reviving the circuit in some form going into 2018 as well. But be sure to sign up for the TGO Harvest. And if you need a link, you can go to gwentlemen.com/TGO. And I think...
Did anyone win twice? Do we actually have 7 separate winners?
Nobody won twice. We have 7 completely separate winners so far. Although one of our previous winners could actually win this one.
Oh man, y'all are scrubs. Well, that's good. That's good for us though. Yeah. I don't enter, so I'm being
that could have been kind of awkward. We would have to do something funky to have a 7-person tournament. Yeah. Anyway. That's going to be it for our topics. So if you guys in chat have any viewer questions, now is the time. You can tag at Gwentlemen, and we'll hang around for the last 10 minutes here and answer your questions. But before we go into that, Truedawn, what is your favorite premium card?
Ooh, favorite premium card. I think it has to be Last Wish. Like the way it's either that or Skellige Storm. I just love the way the water's animated with along with the sound of everything. Sure, so it's got to be one of those two. I just love whenever you click on premium last word, the sound makes it's like water dripping in a cave. It just sounds great. I love that card.
Okay. First viewer question from Bryka. Truedawn, tell us about your dog.
Oh, my dog's name is Roxy. She's a Boxer Terrier mix. She ran away because my mom and dad got home, so she needs to see all her people. But yeah, she's a great, best dog, not close. And I actually have an emote of her on my stream, and you can come see her on my stream if you want to do that. So she's the best dog.
Where can we find you?
Where would people be able to find you?
At twitch.com or Twitch TV / Truedawn FM.
Oh, Truedawn FM.
Yes.
Why are you called Moon on some things?
That's my last name. My name is Frank Moon.
Oh.
Yes.
Because I was half the time I'm like, who is this Moon person? I'm like, wait, that's Truedawn. It's okay. Oh, because we had the podcast and it was and this Moon has been added to the conversation. I'm just like,
yeah,
okay,
that's my name.
Okay, it throws me. It throws me every time.
Okay, Shroud TW says, with 6 neutrals leaked so far and 20 cards, or 21 for Skellige total, wouldn't that mean that there will only be 2 faction cards, 1 silver and 1 bronze, per faction and 10 neutrals? Since 3 faction cards for Skellige would make a minimum of 22 at this point. Yeah, honestly, that possibly could be what that's implying, and I wouldn't have anything against that. I think that neutrals are great for the game if they're printed in a certain way, right? It's a bit tricky to design a fantastic neutral effect, but when you do it, it can really, really empower deck building. I don't know. What do you guys think? Are you guys disappointed with those ratios?
Not at all. I agree completely. Neutral cards are going to be what determines metas. It really is. You look at it from a deck building perspective, and the fact that you're able to just pull from this giant pile in no matter what faction you're in, and we just add more to the pile, it's going to be the right ratio, I think, if we just split it 50-50, 50 neutral cards, 50 faction specifics.
Yeah. Neutral cards are always something that a game can struggle with. And Magic, for instance, has, instead of neutral cards, artifacts, cards you can play in any deck because they're not, they don't have a color. And every time that Magic's formats have broke, it's because they pushed that archetype too far. So you don't want your neutral cards to be the best thing going on, because then they become ubiquitous because every deck can run them.
Exactly.
So
Dr. Boom.
Yeah, Dr. Boom is a good example of Ragnaros. Hearthstone had this problem as well. So you do want neutral cards to be good and not make it so the whole reason you have neutral cards and neutral cards that do important stuff is so that one particular faction or color does not gain all the power. You want a particular effect to be shared by everyone, but if that effect is too good, then you create a ubiquitous problematic card. There's some cards like that in Gwent Curly that are flirting with disaster, Dora Gary is possibly in there.
Yeah, it's right on the edge.
Yeah, it's not there yet. I think it's fine, but it's a card with it could get there. You just need to be conscious of all of this when you're pushing neutral cards, because it doesn't take a whole lot for it to break.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's very difficult to design for, because you're saying, Hearthstone and Magic have fantastic examples of these cards that were pushed too far. But if you're not aggressive enough with your neutral cards, Gwent actually has, in some ways, a problem where many of their neutral cards, 90%, feel like they're kind of too weak. Pretty much all the spells kind of rely on synergies to work, except for some of the silvers and some of the golds. And a lot of the gold cards feel just very value-oriented and not very incredibly usable. So it's a very, very fine line to tread when you're designing neutral cards. But if they're done well, they're amazing for the game.
Yeah,
I agree. I think because we don't have bronze units, neutral, we don't have any bronze neutral units. That's not a thing. No. So it kind of limits the design space in a certain way for CDPR, such that they either have to do spells, and spells are tricky to get right because they don't have a body attached. So you have to make what they do quite good, but then there's a balancing act, or you go for silvers and golds, and then you have the issue of, because they're limited in the deck, you kind of want to have a situation where you don't want to have a neutral card that's played in every single deck. That kind of feels wrong.
Yeah.
You also want to have a situation where people aren't only running neutral silvers and neutral golds, that the faction cards themselves are getting played. So then you have a really kind of difficult time fine-tuning them to find the space that they fit in terms of the meta and the state of the game.
Yeah, reactive cards are an okay way to like go with neutrals. Like that's why I like that's one of the things Gwent does well is like these. Like I think it's okay that they're all spells, because when you have like these reactive elements as your neutral cards, like any deck can go be like, I'm getting beat by X, I'll go add this reactive card to my deck. Like everyone has those tools available to them. Where you run into trouble is when like proactive cards are very good, because it doesn't matter like what deck you're in. If a proactive card is very strong, you're going to want it. So I think they're on a good track right now. And just having like no bronze units definitely seems like the right place to be.
Here's one. On a scale of 1 to Vest, how much juggle physics do you anticipate on Dolith now? What?
11. Wait, I thought I was going to say Mandrake.
Yeah,
Mandrake needs at least 11.
I thought that was. I started reading that because I assumed it was going to end with Mandrake.
Yeah. 0-10 joke.
Yeah. Oh, well, we tried. Here's one. Is the hands-off approach to third-party apps, such as trackers and this new draft thing, for Gwent something the community should be taking notice of? Hands-off approach?
Yeah. What is that? Yeah, in this context, what does that mean?
Yeah, and like it feels like it's almost two separate topics to me. Like one is hands-off approach to trackers, and one's hands-off approach like that arena draft thing. The arena draft thing, I think, is just more of the community being like, all right, we want a new game mode, and CDPR is like, you're getting one. It's like, we want it now. Like it's something that is like, I'm totally fine with, a hands-off approach to that sort of thing. That's the community just being the community. Like Gwent has always been about listening the community and iterating based on what the community is saying, and the community is saying, hey, a draft mode like this is a lot of fun. It's something new. It's something exciting. So I hope that is something that CDPR is taking notice of, and maybe if it's not the game mode that they're looking for, like we're getting introduced, because we know we're getting a new game mode. We don't know what new game mode. I hope it's something that is now popping up on the radar as being like, hey, this is something that people are taking notice of and watching. As far as the trackers are concerned, we've beaten that topic to death over the years, I think.
I feel like I need to go downstairs and get a pet. Having a cat and Truedawn's dog.
Yeah, just get a turtle.
We need one
great.
more for Doragary. Like
the dogs are downstairs, but they'll be in bed. It's like 10. Go wake them up and be like, right, guys, come on, up you come. We're gonna go see the Gwentlemen Talkshow. Because chat would be like, yes, do it. Like, just do it. No.
But yeah, like trackers are like, for normal usability, I think it's fine. Like just for entry level stuff, for competitive stuff, you definitely want to try and ban them, or like just not get them, not involve those at all. But it's not something they should be like actively pursuing to get rid of in normal play.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's one last question. What is your opinion on the rate of which new cards are introduced? Now, from what we know, apparently their plans, as they've detailed thus far, is 20 new cards every 2 months, plus maybe something extra, maybe. They've kind of like said that. How do we feel about that?
That seems like a pretty fast cadence to me. Like it's going to be interesting to see if like they can actually live up to that. I know like Magic's cadence is once every 3 months they release. Actually, I think they changed it to 4. They actually changed it a couple times, but it's like once every 3 or 4 months they have a new set, and it's like fully fleshed out set. Yeah. One thing you don't want to do, and I've seen other card games like Eternal run into this, where if you do a little content quickly, like at small intervals, the content you add isn't impactful enough to change anything, and it's like you never added anything anyway.
Duelist kind of did the same thing as well. They had like a handful every month.
Yeah, so getting the correct cadence is super important. It's something they've definitely appear to be trying to figure out themselves. So they'll have to see what they like best, what allows them to make a fully impactful set, how long that takes. But I definitely don't want to see them feel rushed into a point where they have to just release content, and then the content they're releasing doesn't do anything to the meta.
Yeah, especially if people want expansions on top of that, like new factions, or big kind of releases of cards with different types of pack and stuff, it's a really difficult line to walk. I mean, for me, I would like more cards simply because I feel like the card pool at the moment is not big enough.
Yeah.
Like, I think it really limits the game in a lot of ways, especially with only one game mode. The card pool being, what is it, like 400 cards or so, if that?
I think a little less.
Yeah, with that few cards,
It feels like 50.
Yeah, and I feel like, it means that you're very limited in the kind of decks that you can create, and that's why you see this situation where a lot of people just come up with the same decks, because there's just the same, like, everyone has the same cards and there's not that many, and certain cards are staple, and so you end up in this point where after you've sat down and put 4 golds and 6 silvers into your deck, you've got 15 cards. How much variation is there realistically going to be given the size of the card pool?
Yeah, that's a good point as well. But that's going to be it for our Gwentlemen Talk Show this week. A very exciting one. I'm very happy that they've chosen to go down this road of having us like reveal these cards. I think it's great for generating hype for the entire patch. It's something that a lot of people have been saying they should have been doing for a while. So super excited for the patch in several days. Be sure to check out GwentSlam in the next few days as well. And any closing statements? Let's start with Truedawn, if you have any shout-outs.
It was really fun to do this. Thanks for inviting me. It was an awesome time to see all the new cards, get to evaluate them like live. That was a super fun experience. It's nice to meet you guys, chat. You did good today, chat. If you want to see me come stream,
don't encourage them.
Just check out my Twitch channel, Truedawn.fm, and I'll toss it over to you guys.
Dale, shout-outs.
Okay.
No, Dale first.
Yeah.
Dale first.
Okay, Dale first.
Shout outs to everyone who I got a chance to meet up at TwitchCon for sure. McBeard, I Am Mithranor, Outstar Walker, CDPR employees who will remain nameless for the sake of their sanity. Shout out as always to the official Gwent communities, gwent.reddit.com, the official Gwent Discord, the Ask Gwent Discord as well, which is really great for new players. And I don't know, I'll try and keep them fairly brief, but I will say that if you are trying to go for like that challenger qualifier with those no trackers allowed, and you're just like, how on earth do I do this? Check out twitch.tv/thewhitewolf for the PH.